It has really been drilled in us that we get what we deserve.
That's right.
And from the little things that we say from a child on, when you're going to school for the first time, you have to color inside the lines to get the best thing. When you go to work in high school, you have to wear somebody else's uniform and you have to say these things or else you won't be employed very long. Even for married couples, we're taught to work at our relationship.
Yeah, that's right, work at the relationship.
It just goes through everything. And in our employment, we have to do work. And then comes this one area of religion where it says, no, this is a gift.
That's a freebie.
There's nothing that you do. This is about what God does.
It's just hard to understand, I think. It's hard to accept when we've been conditioned one way. But, Tessine, what does this tell us about God's character?
Well, Moses was the one who asked God to show me yourself. I want to see you.
Yeah.
And what God says in Exodus 34, verse 6 is the Lord God is long-suffering. He's compassionate. He's merciful. You know, he is caring toward us. And we see that illustrated in the fact that he sent his only begotten son to die for each one of us so that we too can be saved. He is an all-compassionate, all-caring God. No matter what we've done, no matter where we've been, God still cares about us, and he extends to us that
all-compassionate, all-caring, who extends to us that grace. Now, is God's grace universal? And if it is, does that mean that everyone's going to be saved?
It is universal, and it was revealed at the cross, according to the book of Romans, but it was given before the creation of the world. So when Jesus is here, he says, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the earth." It's not something we get because of something we've done, because it was given to us a long time ago. And it was given to everybody. Every single person is an object of God's grace. And God is so long-suffering that he works with people who even are running away and trying to hide from him. He keeps after it. But grace is never forced. So the same Bible that tells us that grace is free to everybody reveals that when Jesus comes back and comes to redeem us, there are two groups of people. The one group says yes to the free gift, and the other people say no. And I don't understand that dynamic, why anybody would say that. But it doesn't mean that once you've said yes, you can never say no, because it's not forced. So you can say no to it.
So you're big on free will.
Big on free will. Yeah.
The ability to say yes even or no even to God.
Even to God, yeah.
So how does grace affect the way we treat each other?
Well, Jesus told a parable of a Lord who had two servants, and they became in debt, both of them. One owed $10,000, 10,000 denarii, and the other just 100. The one that owed 10,000, he couldn't afford to pay it. And he would have to be sold and all that he had in order to pay that debt, and he still wouldn't be able to pay it. So what the Lord did, he had compassion on his servant, and he said, "I will forgive you of all these debt." And so he had the one who was forgiven, he had someone who owed him just a small portion of what he had owed the Lord. And he went to him and he said, he took him by the throat and he put him in prison. He said, "I want you to stay there until you can pay me my money." The Lord heard about this and he said, "Wait a minute. Didn't I forgive you? Didn't I have compassion on you and I forgave you? Freely you have received. I want you to freely give. Shouldn't you have had compassion just as I did to you?" And basically God is saying he wants us to extend that grace to one another. Just as we have been forgiven, and we can, in our interactions with one another, we can extend grace to each other.
So it means that we have now to turn around to others and share with them what has been given to us.
Absolutely.
The story you just told about the servant who owed a great debt, when I researched that, the amount that he owed actually was more than the entire annual budget for the Roman Empire for 1 year. For, first of all, a servant could not owe that kind of money. King Herod himself could not borrow it. And a servant never could pay it back. He couldn't even keep up with the interest. So when he told the king, "If you'll give me time, I'll pay back every penny," the people in Jesus' audience must have laughed, because that's a joke. It's an absolute joke, which tells us how incapable we are of paying back the debt we owe our God. I mean, that's basically what this is telling us.
Absolutely.
And having been forgiven so great a debt, then you're right. Our next turn is to turn to each other, because whatever we owe each other is so insignificant by comparison.
Yeah. And another great example of a preacher exaggerating the point to make the point really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it happens.
Yeah.
We're going to be right back after this.
There's more to come. Stay with us.
Thank you and welcome back. I'm visiting with Tessine Watson and Stuart Tyner about God's grace. So I want to know how big, how strong God's grace is. Is God's grace strong enough to cover even the people who flew the jets into the towers on 9/11? You know, this nation, and as I've traveled the world, a lot of people around the world speak of those people in very disparaging terms. If we're going to vilify someone, very often we vilify those individuals, certainly in the West. Is God's grace strong enough? Should one of them have repented or should ask for it? Is His grace strong enough to cover someone like that?
If you believe that God's grace was given before the foundation of the world, which is the biblical position, and if you couple that with the understanding that God knows the beginning from the end, then even in creating this world, God is making an act of grace. He has decided that even in this world where people will run away from Him, the biblical word is stumble, which is an interesting word.
Yeah.
We run away, we stumble, we jump under the bushes and hide from God. Even in this world, God knew that He could either walk away from it, create somewhere else, or He could create here and then walk away, or He could take the responsibility for making another way of eternal salvation for everybody who comes along. So God's grace is so big that it covers everybody, even those people that flew into the World
Twin
Trade
Towers,
Center.
yeah.
But because it's not forced, God makes an appeal to all of us to accept it. And there may many, many people, millions of people, that say, no, thank you, I'd rather not have it. And once we've died, we can't make that decision again. But if we could try to view that from God's perspective, we think it's so easy for God to love us because we're trying.
Yeah, we're good people.
But those people are God's people too.
Absolutely.
And it hurts God, it must hurt God, not only for the person who is hurt by their actions, but the people that are hurting other people. That's not God's character either. And it must give Him immense pain when somebody walks that far away from God.
Well, which brings me to another question.